so much to say when I was watching Ken, because on the one hand, I want to say that like I can totally understand what's going on there because I know the information that he is being told by Christy and Gypsy. I know how they spin narratives, and I know exactly like how they're trying to get him to like ignore certain facts of the case in favor of their narrative of what happened to Gypsy. And I know exactly the tactics that they use to make you feel that way. So like I can understand he has been influenced by Gypsy for a long time, right? And I pride myself on being able to spot narcissists. And I never really got that sense about Christy until Gypsy got out of prison. And I didn't interact with Gypsy a lot because I was mostly Christy's friend. I spoke to Gypsy on the phone twice. We texted and stuff. We had a group text with Christy. And then we also had a private text, the two of us. And yeah, so Ken jumped on a live last night and he was like flipping out because of Zora. So Zora was on this channel called Sir Morbid or something. And it's like a smaller YouTube creator, which is so weird. Like I couldn't believe that Ken and Gypsy would even give a crap about showing up on this small creator's channel because this creator had like 400 people in his live. I think his channel has like 4,000 followers. It's not like, yeah, Sir Mod X on YouTube. What's this? Oh. And yeah. He was like flipping out about, oh God. So here's what I'll tell you about like how Gypsy and Christy operate. I was actually just reading the rules of probation and parole from Missouri. And because I was trying to understand like, what are the conditions? I've never reported her to probation and parole, by the way. Like I know a lot of people thought that I was behind this most recent one, but I really wasn't. I had nothing to do with it. I only found out about it after it happened. And I actually found out about it from Christy, but the story that Christy told me was wildly different about versus what Gypsy was actually doing and why she got in trouble. Zora was spilling tea. Okay, so first off, she's 21 years old, okay? She's had a really rough childhood. She's recently had a boyfriend that passed away. She's gone through a lot in the last few weeks, and she's been dealing with a lot. As she said on her live with Sir Morbid, she's a survivor of Munchausen's by proxy. She's gone through a ton of abuse as a child, as she said on the live, and she felt very connected to Gypsy because of her own childhood experience. And, you know, she was also from Missouri. How did the boyfriend pass away? He had an undiagnosed heart condition. So I think Gypsy was trying to say it was drugs. It wasn't drugs. She said it was an undiagnosed heart condition. And he had a heart attack. So it's really neither here nor there because it's not really relevant to, it's relevant to her because she lost her boyfriend and it's very sad about that. But what he went through or whatever, like what she's going through is kind of the experience that she and I both had. So I don't know anything about David Blanchard. He was the neighbor that lived in Springfield, Missouri. So what I'll tell you though is that Ken is being gaslit, and how he's being gaslit, and I can tell you this just based on my own experience with the Blanchards. Their narrative is that Gypsy, an abused young girl from Louisiana and Missouri, was only able to get out of the control of her mother because of the abusive dynamic they had. The only way out was for her to kill her mom. Okay? And Gypsy didn't know that she could leave, and mom had drafted a document that said that she was not, what was it? The mom drafted a document that said she was not like a power of attorney. But that document actually was not ever provided. It was never notarized. It wasn't official. There was no official documents on record for Gypsy that she was incapacitated or anything like that. Okay? In the community, they were running this scam where Dee Dee was forcing her to sit in a wheelchair as an adult. And Gypsy actually found out she was an adult when CPS came to her house. So when she was 18, her pediatrician filed a report because Dee Dee was going and sending like all kinds of, she was changing all these different date of births, okay? And she found out when CPS came to her house when she was 18, that she was 18 because Dee Dee provided an ID to police that Gypsy was 18. Gypsy found out when she was 18 that she was 18. She knew that she was 18. She knew she was an adult. She knew that. Gypsy had a history of running away. She had gotten involved with a guy named Dan. She does lie so much. She had gotten involved with a guy named Dan, and she and her mom had a very tense relationship for several years because her mom didn't want her to be involved with Dan, who was like, I don't know, a million years older than her. Okay? Dan was like in his mid-30s. Gypsy was 19. I don't know. God damn it, Mom. Why do you want me to date a man that's in his mid-20s? He was also a convicted felon, right? Heaven forbid, Mom, try to keep her daughter away from a convicted felon. That's married, by the way. Dan was married in Arkansas. And she tried to kill her mom after her mom got in between her and Dan's relationship. That was before Nicholas Bodejohn was ever involved in their family, or in her life. In my relationship with Christy, did she ever confide in me that she didn't believe Gypsy? No. No. Christy is banking on this story that Dee Dee was a abusive mother because it deflects away from Rod's neglect, okay? Does that make sense? It's very important to Rod and Christy that Dee Dee's the abuser because Rod was wholly neglectful, so neglectful as a father. In 1995, Dee Dee had to take Rod to court because Rod had failed to pay child support. He had failed to pay medical expenses. He had failed to pay his alimony. He was held in contempt. He was sentenced to 10 days in jail. He got a suspended sentence for that. Okay? Rod fathered 2 girls in the same year, Gypsy and another girl, okay? So Dad had to go to paternity. I know you already know that, but I think he was neglectful because he was young, and I think he was neglectful because I don't know that it has anything to do with Christy, frankly. I mean, he's a grown-ass man. He is a grown-ass man. He had every opportunity in the world to have relationships with these kids, and he didn't. This is my favorite Katie you don't play when she comes for someone that uses her. So do I think that Christy doesn't believe Gypsy? I think that, I don't know. I know people online were talking last night about how they had heard that Christy had told the parole board that she was scared of Gypsy. I never heard Christy say anything like that. I mean, I heard her say a lot of things about Gypsy that weren't always kind, but I never heard her say that she was like afraid of her. Being an absentee father is way different than Dee Dee did. What did Dee Dee do that's worse than completely abandoning your child and having nothing to do with your child for years? Don't you think both parents, and then having 2 other kids and being a good father with your 2 other kids, but completely ignoring the fact that you have another daughter? So Christy once told me the story. I found this little text message, and Dee Dee did a lot worse. Okay. I actually got a hold of the text message. I actually got a hold of the medical records. Katie is just as bad as Dee Dee. Ooh, that's mean. Spilling all the tea. Yes. What unkind things did Christy say about Gypsy? That Gypsy lies. A lot. That Gypsy doesn't listen to anyone. That Gypsy's out of control. That Gypsy is irrational and impulsive. That Gypsy is, I don't know. Not prepared to be a mother. So they're already coming after me. So last night, Ken was live on that channel. And so everyone knows that Ken, by now, you all know that Ken got involved with Gypsy before she was actually divorced and separated from Ryan, right? You know that? And she was talking to him in February, and Ryan found out about that. You guys know that, right? Yeah. And so Ken contributed to a marriage getting broken up, which he denies. He contributed to infidelity in her marriage, which he denies. He'll explain this all in a different way. Ken did have a prepared speech because everything that he said about Nick and the crimes that Nick committed and the fact that Gypsy was this weak flower, that she didn't know any better, that it's, Nick's the monster, that's their narrative. Like at home with their friends, they drill that into people, that it's Nick that's the monster, it was Nick that did the kill, it wasn't Gypsy's fault, none of that. That's their MO. Like everything he was saying about Nick is literally like a script that they use with their friends about Gypsy. So it's like the same script that they use with everyone. And when he was saying all of these things, I was like, I used to believe what he was saying too. Like she had no other option. They really want people to feel like she had no other option. But that's just not true. She had a lot of other options. I'm going to block you for saying that Dee Dee got what she deserved, because that's just not an unnecessary comment. I'm sorry, but that's the narrative that Gypsy wants people to believe, like her mom got what she deserved. So nobody deserves what happened to Dee Dee. No one deserves what happened to Dee Dee. So he was like going off about how Nick was the one that used the knife and Nick's the one that straddled her and did all that stuff. But then he fails to say Gypsy's the one that stole the knife, Gypsy's the one that gave him the knife, Gypsy's the one that texted him to come over, Gypsy's the one that made a video which told him exactly where to go and where his mom would be sleeping. Remember this video? Gypsy's the one that asked him repeatedly and like manipulated him and like beat him down to a point where like he, as an autistic boy, believed that that was the only option. And Nick has said repeatedly that he got fixated on it because that's what happens with autism. I have a child, my son is autistic, and when someone with autism gets fixated on a topic and fixated on something, you cannot change their mind. Sorry, gotta do my eyeliner here. So I don't believe Dan. I don't know any, I don't know about Dan, frankly. I don't have a lot to say about Dan. Gypsy never talks about Dan. Christy never brings up Dan. Nobody, I know that like that was a big topic of the Becca Scoop stuff where she was talking about Gypsy being obsessed with Dan. And yes, Gypsy was obsessed with Dan. That's true. But Gypsy doesn't talk about Dan ever. And sorry, your son loves my shirt. I got it from Poppy Playtime. Okay, so, oh, can I show the palette? Sure. It's Natasha Denona's Golden palette. Do you guys like Natasha? I love Natasha. She's my favorite. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I never heard them talk about Dan, so it was like always just very like this. I know that he's a topic in the case and stuff, but I never, ever, ever, ever heard them talk about Dan. It was always like, Nick is a monster. Dee Dee was an abuser. Gypsy had no other choice. It was all Nick's fault. Nick's the one that got her into BDSM. So one of the lies that they sold me on, and I actually heard Ken parroting this. I heard him parrot this last night. This is how I knew that he's being manipulated and brainwashed. Is he said that Gypsy never had these thoughts and was never expressing any sort of violence before Nick. Like, it was all Nick, right? And he was like, she never was into this before Nick. That was all Nick. Nick was the one that put this in her head. That's not true, actually, at all. And they told me that too. Like, that was their whole MO. Like, it was Nick that planted this concept in her head, not Gypsy. She never would have thought about this if not for Nick. That was what they told me over and over and over again. So imagine my surprise when they're all like, well, the documentary's coming out that we've been working on for like 5 years. Prison Confections or whatever. And I was like, all right, what is it? And imagine my surprise after being told for years that Gypsy was not at all, never had those thoughts. Imagine my surprise when suddenly she's like, oh yeah, I shot my mom with a BB gun in 2011 and I tried to kill her. She didn't know Nicholas got it go to John in 2011. I thought it was Nick that made her think that. But Nick wasn't even in her life. So how was Nick the one that made her think that? Nick didn't make her think that. So they had carefully like curated this construct about Gypsy before she got out. They had crafted this narrative for a very long time. And they were able to keep it very under wraps and control because Gypsy was incarcerated and she didn't have access to the media and she didn't have the capacity to like waffle on the story because she didn't have regular access to anyone, okay? And so because she was incarcerated, they could perpetuate the same story over and over and over again, and Gypsy couldn't open her mouth and really change it. Now, she did have discrepancies in her various interviews, and if you go back in time and you look at all of the interviews, you can tell that she is lying, right? But once Gypsy got out, they couldn't control the narrative anymore. And so Gypsy, as the reformed prisoner that was remorseful, that was so sad about all of it, that was the story they were telling. It says that I would like Gypsy to come back and do a modified barium swallow study and speech therapy to assess her swallowing function. She was being treated for over hypersalivation because she was choking and coughing all the time, even in clinic. It says, I would like her to also see Dr. Carla Brown in the Odontology clinic here to discuss the possibility of litigating the parotoid ducts or the removal of accessory salivary glands to try to reduce the load of saliva and decrease her problem with pooling and secretions. I encourage the family to review all of that. So she had pooling in the back of her throat of saliva, and she only had one set of her salivary glands removed. Only one set. Here's another example of something where it's Gypsy's reporting this, not Dee Dee. She says, in addition to the above, Gypsy has a long history of swallowing dysfunction. She can only take very small amounts of liquids and very soft foods by mouth. She has trouble swallowing those because they seem to get stuck in my throat. She told the doctor that food was getting stuck in her throat. She drools during the daytime, a fair amount, although she does not seem to soak bibs or towels. She also seems to drool and pool secretions in the back of her throat while sleeping overnight. She has a history of asthma and rhinitis, and she used Nasonex. So they pulled out her teeth because she had cavities. She had tooth decay. Did you know that one of the instructions, once she had some of her teeth removed, was no fizzy pop and brush her teeth? No fizzy pop and brush her teeth. Kind of weird. She was drinking a lot of soda. She didn't have dry mouth. She didn't have dry mouth. Her salivary gland, by the way, was removed in like 2002. or 2004. She never teeth extracted until 2013, and it wasn't from dry mouth. And she had one of the 3 glands removed. Like, there's literally a thing in here about getting her tubes placed, and they talk about her eardrum being burst. No, the teeth did not rot. The teeth rotted in 2013. That's when she had them all removed. Gypsy was 20 years old, 21 years old. Yep, 21 years old when she had her teeth removed. And it said no fizzy pop. There's another thing in here. Let's see. There's actually a note in here when she's doing her, she had to do feeding therapy and swallowing when she got her feeding tube. And they were calling her behavior. They were saying it could be behavioral. Let's see if I can find it. And Dee Dee knew as far back as 2001. So in 2001, they were trying to figure out why she was having issues with her legs because Dee Dee was lying that she couldn't walk. So they did all kinds of MRIs and CT scans, which are not medical abuse. They were trying to rule out stuff. And then they actually did a muscle biopsy. And the muscle biopsy actually found that she had atrophy in her muscles. But it was unknown what caused it. But she didn't have muscular dystrophy. It could be from disuse, yes, but they didn't determine that it was from disuse. It also said it could be from CNS something and something else undetermined. Christy gave the medical records to Fancy, Natasha, and other creators. But when I saw so my son has a feeding tube, okay? And I know how feeding tubes work, and I know how that works. And my son has a sleep disorder, so I know how sleep studies work. And some of the stuff that they found wouldn't have been something that Dee Dee would have been able to fake because she had a sleep study that found that she couldn't exhale enough while she was sleeping and she was hypoventilating. That's why she had a CPAP. Her carbon dioxide levels were up and her oxygen would go down. And so they went through months where they tested and then they put her on a CPAP. And before they even prescribed the CPAP, they tested her without the CPAP and with the CPAP to see if it improved, and it did. You guys are really focused on the atrophy for the muscles, and that's going to like somehow condition you to believe that the muscle biopsy was for naught. Regardless of what atrophy had found, all I know is it says that she didn't have muscular dystrophy. She had atrophy in her muscles, and do you guys what year do you think the muscle biopsy was done? How do you do a poll? What year do you think it was done? You think it was done in 2008, 2006, 2009, 2013. Oh, wow, you think it was 2013. Okay. What if I told you that it wasn't any of those? I gotta find it here. What if you found out it wasn't 2005? What if you thought it wasn't 2006? What if it wasn't 2004? What if it was 2001? The muscle biopsy was in 2001. She was 9 years old. They were at Tulane University, or they were in New Orleans. The muscle biopsy was done because Gypsy had Dee Dee said that she couldn't walk, but also Gypsy has low muscle tone. So one of her diagnoses based on a neurological ambulatory clinic notes is that she's hypotonic. Do you guys know what that means? Do you guys know what that means? Do you know what hypotonia is? Hypotonia means low muscle tone. A byproduct of the fact that she has this microdeletion is that individuals with a microdeletion have low muscle tone. It's not decreased muscle tone, it's low muscle tone. Who cares? Well, why are you here, Stanley? If you don't care, why are you here? I'm becoming fixated. Okay, Thrifty Swifty. Oh, hi, Kay. Hi, Kay. I know Kay. How are you, Kay? I don't have any mods. I'm good. Kay, can I make you a mod for a minute? Can you help me mod? How do I make someone a mod? I don't even know how to do that. Do you know how to make mods? Add moderator. Okay. Thank you, Kay. Kay's from YouTube. Kay has a YouTube channel. She's gonna help. I know I saw that you haven't been on forever. Kay used to not really like me. So funny. She used to think that I was like a big fat liar because of all those hate accounts, and then she realized that those hate accounts were like lying about me. So she had hypotonia. She had she had neuromuscular issues. So another thing was that she had asthma. And she had like low tone. And they did a study where they were doing an asthma. So if you have a child with asthma, they go to the pulmonologist. Have you ever done one of those blow studies where they have to they want you to blow to see like what your lung capacity is, so that to see how much air you can get out? Yeah. So when she was a child, she didn't have the lung capacity or the strength in her chest to get a full breath out. They attributed it to having low muscle tone in her mouth. She was diagnosed with dysphagia in her mouth as well. Dee Dee for sure exaggerated things in Louisiana or in Missouri, and she definitely with the muscular dystrophy, but muscular dystrophy was ruled out in 2001. And a lot of the stuff, I remember in the series, they kept saying that mother reports, and yes, that's true. But in a lot of these records, Gypsy's actually interacting directly and answering questions and telling them things. She's the one doing the feeding therapy. She's the one choking and gagging during a swallow study. I want to find that swallow study. Most of her surgeries are for ear tubes. And then she was having strep throat, so she had her tonsils taken out and her adenoids, which kids get tonsillitis. Oh, you want yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm going to do my mascara right now. Sorry. I've got it. Sorry. So she had her adenoids and her tonsils taken out in 1999 when she was 8. She had multiple sets of ear tubes because she had chronic ear infections. She had asthma and she couldn't expel her breath, which led to hypoventilation at night. The seizures are a mystery to me. According to the medical records, Dee Dee said the first seizure happened when she was 3 months old. Who knows if that's true? And the only doctor Here's the weird thing, you guys. In the documentaries, none of her doctors from Louisiana are interviewed. And the doctors that were interviewed never treated her for anything. So her ENT was never interviewed. Her eye doctor that did the ophthalmology, that did the testing, that did the muscle surgeries for her eye, never interviewed. You know why? Because she had chronic ear infections and she needed those surgeries. Because she had a lazy eye, and they did surgeries on the eye to improve her muscle strength 4 times. So why would they bring on an eye doctor and a ear doctor that did necessary surgeries? No, they had other doctors that came on. They brought on a pediatrician that met her in Missouri that never treated her for anything. And the documentaries act like none of her surgeries were necessary. And Gypsy acts like none of her surgeries were necessary. She said, I had multiple throat surgeries. She had her tonsils removed because she was having strep throat. She had her adenoids removed because she was having strep throat. And she had Botox. They tried to avoid taking out her salivary glands, and she was treated with Botox. Did you know that? For months. For a couple of years, actually. And the doctors would ask her if she was getting relief from her coughing and from her congestion and from like the pooling of the saliva. And she would get the Botox and she would say, yes, they were relieved for like 7 months. He never changed it at home, which is so gross. And so changing a feeding tube is super, super easy. Hold on, let me show you. I just want to show you what this stuff looks like. Did you see any boxes like this in any of those photos? Did you see any boxes like this? These are what the extensions are for a feeding tube. So here's a feeding tube extension. So this is how you hook it up to a feeding tube, and that's how you open it. So it's a little button that's on the tummy, right? And then this, you lock it in, right? And it has a little lock, it says lock on it. And then these are 2 separate ports, right? This is for meds, and then this is for feeding. If you don't need to give meds, you just close this one off. And then if you're just doing food, you would use this one. And then they have syringes that literally like screw in, and then you don't lose anything, okay? There's 2 kinds of buttons. There's a Mickey and there's a Mini, and neither have anything to do with pediatric or adult. There's just 2 separate kinds. So you can have a Mickey or a Mini button. So this is my son's. This is what it looks like. This is what's called a Mini button, okay? And the button is right up here. And it just inflates. It's not painful at all. Not at all. So in order to change it, you see here, this is, it's like Astroglide kind of, it's like KY jelly. You know, whatever that is, it's like, it's a balloon. Yep, it's a balloon. So you have a syringe and you add 5 mils of water. You check the balloon to see how much water's in it to make sure there's not a hole in it, okay? And then this is like the glide. So before you change the tube, what you do is you take this syringe and you put it on the tummy and you pull the water out, okay? And then when you pull the water out, the button comes up and air will expend from the stoma. When you've had a feeding tube for years, your stoma is already healed. It's not gonna stretch out. It just glides out. It's a tiny little balloon. And when it comes out, you see that? We have a bunch of these, so I'm just showing you how these work. So this little piece here, once it's deflated, it's like smaller than the stoma, okay? So it's gonna be way smaller than the stoma. So it just glides in and glides out. And the tissue that's in the stoma is healed. There's no pain, there's no blood, none of that. A stoma is the hole. It's the hole. It's stoma, S-T-O-M-A. It's the hole. If you're caring for it and if you have proper G-tube care and you have proper G-tube maintenance and you're changing it once to every 2 months and you're not going lengths of time where you're not changing it, it should not be painful in any capacity. You just put it in and then you, no. The stoma is the hole that it goes in. So Gypsy wouldn't change hers, would only change it every 6 months. No, Gypsy did not sue me. If your G-tube does hurt, there's probably something wrong with the stoma or something. It shouldn't hurt. It shouldn't. So changing one literally takes like 2 minutes because you take one out and then you put one in, okay? And then Gypsy said that she was fed by a machine. When you saw any of those photos, did you see anything like this? Did you see anything in any of those crime scene photos that looked like this? No. In the med cabinets, did you see anything that looked like this? No. In the med cabinets, did you see any boxes that looked like this? No. In the med cabinet, did you see any boxes that looked like this? No. And there was no pump and no syringes. No pump and no syringes. Do you guys want to see what the pump looks like? Just so you can be clear, so you understand what the pump looks like. So here's what the extension looks like. I'll go get the pump. Did you guys see an IV pole in her house? Anywhere? Because that's how you put these pumps at home. And then to feed, and if you have a feeding tube, all of this is prescribed, right? So you would get a doctor and they send you the IV pole. We've had this one for like 6 years. They don't go bad. You hook up your bag, okay? It goes into the pump. My son's not fed by pump, he's fed by bolus. But we use the pump when he's sick. Everything goes in here like this, right? So this is what it would look like when it's all together. Actually, we're going to put it on the side. Did you see anything like that in their house? Okay, no. Nothing, right? There was no machine, there was no bags, there were no buttons, there were no extensions, there was no formula. It was weird. And then if you do bolus, I don't have the right syringes. They recently changed what you get when you have a feeding tube. So now they used to have extensions that weren't screwed in, and you could just plop a 60 ml syringe in. And so you would stick the tip in like this. It would like go in like this, and then you just pour the food in, and then you just let it gravity into the stomach. So we use the screw-in ones, and I couldn't find one of the screw-in ones, but the screw-in one goes in like this, and then it just gravity feeds. And it takes like 10 to 15 minutes. You can do a bolus feed with a pump, but you can also bolus with a syringe. You can also bolus with a bag as well. So you can connect the bag without connecting it to a pump. And then you can manually move the fluid this way. There's lots of different ways that you can bolus. And it all comes down to tolerance. So some people can't tolerate a lot in their stomach at one point, so they have to use a pump. Pumps are most common with babies. Once people get older, they're usually able to tolerate gravity feeding, unless they have like really like GJ tubes that have to go slower. Okay. So those were the things that I noticed weren't anywhere in the house. Yes, my son actually has gastroparesis, but he can handle bolus feeds now. When he's sick, he can't handle bolus feeds because his stomach slows down. But yeah, gastroparesis is a really common reason for people to have feeding tubes. Okay, does that help everyone? I hope. I just wanted to show you, like, those were things that were like red flags for me, because I was like, the house doesn't look like it has any of the medical supplies for someone that's using a feeding tube. You're a bit boring. I should have hit 1 million. What does that mean? Why are so many people? Yeah. I thought it might help people understand, like, my son has gastroparesis. It's due to his his hydrocephalus and central nervous system dysautonomia dysfunction. Gastroparesis is a partially paralyzed stomach, okay? You can get gastroparesis a couple different ways. It can be neurological, meaning that the brain isn't sending the proper signals to your organs, or it can be from the stomach actually being damaged. So a side effect of diabetes when people don't take care of their diabetes is they can get gastroparesis, and it's not a neurological form of the gastroparesis. It's that the stomach actually gets damaged, like the stomach lining and the stomach muscle. And so there's multiple ways you can get it. And yes, medications can cause it as well. Yeah, so my son's is from the nervous system. Like, he's had it since birth. So, yeah. He's a good kid, though. Good kid. Thank you for the heart. I did ask Gypsy about this. She was shocked. I actually showed her a video of our cabinet, well, I'll just show you. I'll just come show me. I'll show you. Okay, how do I turn my computer? How do I turn the camera? How do I turn the camera around? Okay, so this is like what she should have had if she was a feeding tube. So you have like your extensions and all of your different syringes and your different equipment, that kind of stuff. And I didn't, that's a cute blanket. Oh, this one? This one? This one is actually knitted by someone for my son when he had heart surgery. So that's it. But I noticed she didn't have anything like that in her house. And I was like, that was weird. Why doesn't she have syringes? Why doesn't she have, and she had asthma too, right? So why didn't she have nebulizers? And why weren't there extensions for her nebulizers? Yes, you can go to school with a feeding tube. Yep. Yeah, and you know what's funny is Christy was like, in every aspect of the house, it was totally disorganized. But when I went into the med closet, it was perfectly organized. I'm like, what? Like 3 shelves were. Did you look at the top shelf and the bottom and the floor? It was like a complete disaster. I don't know what EES means. You keep asking that question, but I don't know what EES means. Yeah, and did you notice that like they had so much stuff in there, like almost like they weren't even using any of those meds? Exactly. She was stockpiling, exactly. Hoarding medical supplies, exactly. Yep. Oh, erythromycin, no. We tried that when he was really little and it didn't do anything. It sometimes works, but no, he doesn't take that. He just gets vented a lot. No, he's never been on TPN. TPN is last resort, by the way. TPN is only when patients can't tolerate anything in their stomachs. Do you have a plan to fix? He has a mini button. All right, so I'm gonna go. I need to eat dinner. It's 7 o'clock here. I wanna go live on my YouTube channel still. This has been super fun. You guys have been so cute. I have 349 new followers. Oh my God, and 54 gifts. You guys are so cute. Thank you. Thank you for following. If you haven't followed, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for all the gifts, friends. I've never been a huge TikToker before, so thank you for being here.